Between the two of them. The inside of Coates. Parker gets too heavily involved. And that's Whitehead and Coates.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome along to the VRRC, where it's time almost for round number 2 of the VRRC Porsche Cup, which got off to a spectacular start a week ago. Those of you who didn't tune in for our opening rounds at Brands Hatch, well, you missed one of the best nights of racing that the VRRC has put on for an awfully long time. And as we now venture into our second week of racing at Donington Park, I'm sure we'll have much more of the same. Andy McEwen with you tonight to talk through all of the action. And I've got a very special guest alongside me who we'll be hearing from in a minute or two, because we have got the one and the only Max Coates joining me on co-coms for tonight to give his expert opinion of what's going on out on the track. Someone who I'm sure many of you will know from his real-world racing exploits. Pretty handy on the sim as well is Max. So looking forward to getting some of his thoughts as we move on into the night. For the night's races, we're racing Donington Park, the Grand Prix layout in action tonight. It's the second of 8 weeks of racing. From here, we head to Croft, to Vallelunga, to Oulton Park, Snetterton, Circuit Paul Ricard, and it all finishes on the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone on the 20th of December. So a nice little early Christmas present for you there. What should be a very, very final round of the championship. And of course, after that final round of the championship, we'll be handing out our prizes across the Porsche classes, the two classes. It's the CAMMUS wheel and pedals going the way of our champion, the sim racing seat courtesy of Riggs, our second placed prize, and then we've got the bit of mecha gear there for the third place driver. We've also got the VRRC team wear for the 4th and 5th place driver, plus the driver of the round award, which last week went to Kyle Felvers, who was one of the early pace setters in the championship, and that is the PowerMax Valeting kit and a driver of the round medal as well to fight for across the Porsche GT3 class. Within the GT4 class, we also have prizes, racing gloves, and the PowerMax kit for the champion. Some VRRC racing teamwear for the rest of the top 5 drivers, and one of those valeting packs going to them as well. And we also have the separate driver of the round for the Cayman GT4 class as well, which will be equally hotly contested. We may have had one driver dominating proceedings in that class a week ago, but a long way still to go in the season for others to move up and challenge. Well, what happened here, you ask? Well, even if you were tuning in, easy to forget some of the excitement that we witnessed a week ago, but it was Carl Felvers who came out on top. Carl Felvers had a really strong night at Brands Hatch. He didn't qualify on the pole position. He only finished second in race 1, but then came from the back of the grid, and a big grid. It was a busy grid in race 2 to claim the race victory, whilst two of the new drivers in the championship, Theo Mercuris, a real-life radical racer, and Jay Warren, the son of Mark Warren, who's been racing in racing Porsches and Ginettas in the real world for the last few years. They were very, very quick indeed. In fact, Jay Warren set the pole position time in qualifying last time out and backed that up with a podium finish in race 1, whilst Theo Mercouris won the very first race, won on his debut here at the VRRC, and was on the podium in race number 2 as well. So early days, but they are your Porsche Cup top 3. Meanwhile, well, that was a little bit more of a one-way street. Paul Laramie dominant, qualified on pole position, led the majority of both races, although Chris Blakey did give him a run for his money in race 2, led for a portion of that second race, but a couple of little off-track excursions meant that Laramie was able to come through and claim both of the victories, while Sam Milner was reasonably consistent as well. He had a podium finish in race 1, just missed the podium in race 2, so he sits third in the Cayman class as we arrive here, Donington Park. So this is how the championship standings look after the first of 8 weeks. Remember, once we get to the end of the season, the drivers will start to calculate their dropped score, their lowest night of racing. But Kyle Felvers, with that second place and a win from a week ago, leads the way from Theo Mercouris and Elliot Dalton-Ayres. Andy Dorman had a really solid night, a pair of top 5 finishes for the Eden Garage driver to sit 4th in the points, ahead of Jay Warren, Josh Martin, Nicky Taylor down in 7th. That surprise. Andy Carroll was next, whilst in the Cayman class, Paul Laramie, with those 2 race victories from pole position, took the maximum points haul from Brands Hatch. 2 second place finishes for Chris Blakey, with Milner 3rd. John Jones was 4th. Kenny Press got himself a podium in race 2, so he sits 5th ahead of Mark Stokes, Darren Butler and Ben Smith. So that was the 8 drivers that we had out in the Cayman GT4 category last time out. Well, before we move into qualifying, chance, I think, to bring in my co-commentator for the night, Max Coates, who, as I said in the intro, Max, you're someone who has real-life experience racing in these cars. You're a pretty handy sim racer as well, and I reckon you know a thing or two about Donington Park, so I think you're all set to give us some expert input here tonight. Good to have you on board.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to be here. Well, I'll certainly try. So, yeah, I've got experience of driving around Crater Curves. I was just looking at that on the track maps, one of the difficult corners here at Donington Park, and it's clearly got my attention straight away. So, yeah, I've driven around Donington Park quite a few times on both layouts in the Cayman. Recently driven the 992 Cup Car last week at Silverstone. So, yeah, although I haven't driven them on the sim, I'm probably in a pretty good place to give some insight from a real-world driver's perspective.
Well, let's take a look at the cars then, because to the untrained eye, they're both Porsches. They both look more or less the same. But as we saw last week, quite the performance difference between the two. From the driver's seat, Max, where are the biggest differences between these two cars?
Yeah, I mean, the first place you jump to is power. The GT3, the 911 has pretty much another 100 brake horsepower, and it feels incredibly more torquey. So, you can see there your 0 to 60 time is almost like 3/4 of the time in a GT3 versus a Cayman. And to be honest, that's where you really, really feel it as a driver, is in the initial punch out the corner. So that is your big difference. They're a little bit lighter, but the biggest difference in terms of feel is in the power, and then secondary would be in the handling.
Indeed so, and we have a good opportunity now actually to compare the two cars, because as always, dive into qualifying, we can take a little look around the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit with not one but 2 onboard. One in the Cup Car and one in the Cayman GT4. So let's sit back, relax, and enjoy the sights and sounds of Donington Park before we head into qualifying. So, a lap of the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit and a chance to compare the 2 classes of car. Cup Car on the left and the GT4 Cayman on the right. The extra downforce of the Cup Car allowing them to carry more speed through Redgate Corner. A good overtaking opportunity that, but the exit speed is crucial because it carries you through the most famous sequence of corners on the circuit, the Craner Curves. Position the car nicely on the left now for the old hairpin, where again with that extra downforce the Cup Car is planted to the road. Cayman, though, proving to be a bit more of a handful. Then we accelerate steeply uphill through Starkey, Schwantz Curve and onto the brakes into the right-hander at McLean's. 4th gear, interestingly, for Axelsen in the Cup Car. 3rd gear, higher revs in the GT4 to keep that minimum corner speed up. Then comes Coppice, a blind right-hander where the back of the car on the rear-engined Cup Car tries to overtake the front before eventually finding some grip and traction out onto the exhibition straight. Now a really tricky left-right flip-flop chicane follows at the Fogarty S's. Careful about track limits. Inch perfect there for Eric Axelsen in the Cup car. Whilst again that change of direction is harder with the Cayman with that little bit less aerodynamic grip. Then into the best overtaking opportunity on the circuit, down at the Melbourne hairpin. Lots of different lines that you can take on the way in and on the way out before accelerating uphill into Goddard's. Ride that curb on the right-hand side, brake just about at the end of the curb in both cars before pitching into the over-the-crest left-hand hairpin that completes a lap of the magnificent Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. Always a track that produces great racing. So that is a driver's eye view of the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit, one of the real drivers' favourites. It's fast, it's a really technically demanding section at the end of the lap, and that's where often a lot of the overtaking can be found, but it's one of those tracks which always promotes good side-by-side action, and I'm sure that's what we're going to see tonight, because let's be honest, the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, where we raced a week ago, is not necessarily known for producing great side-by-side racing, and yet that's exactly what these drivers were able to display for us, so we should have some really good action here tonight. So we're into qualifying then. We're nearly halfway through the 15-minute qualifying session, and as you can see down the left-hand side of the timing tower, it's Nicky Taylor who is fastest. Now, Nicky, a bit more of a front-wheel drive specialist, really, racing in minis as he does in the real world, but despite a slightly off start to the season a week ago, Nicky looking more competitive here tonight. Jay Warren, second fastest. Of course, Jay carrying a bit of ballast now. He was ballast-free a week ago, but because he sits up there in the top three in the championship, he'll be carrying a bit of championship ballast for the first time. Of course, Eric Axelsen sits third, Joel Last fourth, and Carl Felvers, who we're watching on board with there on the right-hand side of the screen, is fifth fastest right now, the championship leader, carrying a bit of extra weight coming into the second night of racing, and he's going to need to account for that. This is not the hardest of circuits, Max, I would imagine, to be carrying a bit of ballast. He'll be carrying the full 25 kilos as the championship leader, but there are parts of this track, particularly that final sector, I think, that could hurt.
Yeah, it actually, carrying ballast and weight is something I've not really ever experienced in my racing career. It's not something I've ever had to manage, but I'd imagine here the difficult part is going to be that last sector. You've got two big hairpins, two big stops, so stopping more weight and pulling more weight off the corner isn't going to help. So it is probably, I would have said, more of an issue in the GT4 that will maybe struggle a little bit more off the corner. I think the 911 probably has a little bit more punch and managed to deal with the weight a little bit better. But we'll see how it goes.
Indeed, yeah, that final sector definitely somewhere that will be a challenge. Carl actually carrying 25 kilos of championship ballast, and then we also, for those of you new here to the VRRC, such as Max, we have a separate driver ranking system, and Kyle is level 4 driver ranking, which means that he carries 20 kilos of ballast anyway, because he's one of the fastest drivers we've got here, and then throwing that extra championship ballast, it's 45 kilos that he's got on board his Porsche Cup car, and that will certainly be holding him back a little bit. Now, we're right on board with another new driver to the championship, Ben Smith, one of the youngsters joining the fray from this second round, and he already is on the pace, actually. Fastest so far in the Caymans. Max, we're halfway round a lap now, but you can see that Ben Smith is pushing hard as he makes his way up towards McLean's.
Yeah, so I'm just obviously new to this myself as well. So on that left-hand screen, I'm assuming that the white little mark by Smith's name indicates that he's in the Cayman.
I think that just means we're on board with him, actually. It's a handy way for us to follow who we've got on screen.
There we go. So yeah, that's who we're on board with. So to kind of come through here, we're heading along towards the chicane, braking probably just around the brow of the hill, trying to cut as much of this corner as possible. There's no big tyre stacks or horrible yellow blobs on the apex there that we have in the real life world. He's very late on the brakes there, certainly much later than we can get away with in real life, so that's impressive to see. A little bit of sawing at the wheel there as he comes out of the corner, so I think we're heading back on board a few other people now, and that looks like a Carrera Cup car to me rather than the where's he going? Yeah, that's why he's getting out of Jay Warren's way, that's why. So I think that we were on board there with Carl Fulvers, who's obviously been one of the front runners last time out.
Yeah, championship leader early doors is Kyle, who's been praying for a return to rear-wheel drive cars. Some of our touring car championships that we've been running recently, he's been quick in, but he's been made no secret of the fact that he does prefer a rear-wheel drive GT car. He is second fastest right now. Nicky Taylor no longer quickest because this man has gone to the top. This is Erik Axelsson, the Swedish assassin, who took a bit of a break from racing actually earlier on this year. Good to see that he's back now in full-time competition here at the VRRC, a multiple former champion in other categories here with us at the VRRC, and well, he had a solid start to his season a week ago. He came out with only 10th place in the championship, but had better pace than that. Got caught up in an incident at the start of race number 2, which wasn't ideal. But here at Donington Park, he is really quick. Now, Max, you won't know Erik necessarily, but one thing that we've learnt over the years is he's a super smooth and clean driver, and that really, that always strikes me as the driving style that will work best for you at a track like Donington Park. A smooth driver always seems to go well here.
Yeah, probably even more so on the Nationals. So the way the circuit's split up is almost in 2 parts. That looks like we've got a spinner just ahead of us. Fortunately, we've got around that with Anderson, who we're on board with. But yeah, the track is kind of in 2 parts. The first corner and the last corner on the National are 1 part, with the 2 hairpins in there as well. They're kind of a little bit more harder braking, bigger stop, where the rest of the circuit is much more fast and flowing, and sometimes you are better to take a little bit in 1 part of the circuit to gain a little bit in another. So there's yeah, a few places where they might sort of, you know, Crane and Curve is a good example. You might not want to be flat down there because you compromise your line for old hairpins. So trying to mix that up is something that they'll all be thinking about tonight.
And Erik Axelsson right now thinking about ending this lap strongly, although he's not really improving in the sectors. One man who is, though, is Nicky Taylor. Nicky Taylor's just gone purple in Sector 1, and there he is, Rich Hayden, who is behind the broadcast tonight, reading my mind because he saw that Nicky had put that purple Sector 1 in. Now, the trouble is, Nicky has got one of the GT4 CAMMUS just ahead as they turn into Coppice Corner, a full commitment, blind right-hander. Nicky's line slightly compromised here, and you'd imagine that this means his middle sector might not be a huge improvement, but Taylor showing much more pace this week than we saw from him a week ago at Brands Hatch. That's exactly what we like to see. He's running a sort of pig tribute livery on his Porsche 911 Cup Car, I notice. And as he drops down into Melbourne Hairpin, it is going rapidly. Now, he needs to find a little chunk of time, only a little chunk of time, 35 thousandths of a second, to get the pole. Top 4 drivers are covered by less than 3/4 of a tenth of a second. It's super tight once again at the front. So can Nicky Taylor find that small advantage that he needs to move on to the front row of the grid? Comes across the timing line in a moment or two. Is it going to be an improvement for Taylor? The answer is no. I think that little bit of traffic that he caught in the middle sector was enough in the end to hold him back. Here's Jay Warren then. He sits 4th place right now. Jay Warren, the other driver, within that 10th of a second. And Max, I'm sure you've been in this situation before in qualifying when there are so many drivers within a fraction of a second of each other. You can be only slightly off your A game and find yourself mid-grid, and that's not the best place to be.
Yeah, Jay also on for a current best lap. So yeah, he's gone purple in Sector 1, which is impressive. But yeah, the first sector's quite small, so it's not necessarily the one to take everything off.
No, indeed, it's that middle sector which is the longer of the sectors, and Jay not improving in that sector. We do have an improvement for Theo Mercuris, though, just ahead of him on the road. So we're going to get 2 drivers coming to the line very shortly, both of whom have improved, at least through part of the lap. We'll wait and see whether they can put it together at the end of the lap as we get, in fact, towards the end of the qualifying session. Not a huge amount of time left, so Jay Warren rounds the final turn at Goddard's, and in fact, he's going to head for the pit lane. So that's his qualifying session done. Theo Mercuris, I think, has also gone into the pits, so neither of them in the end, having picked them up, are going to put in an improvement. So it's looking increasingly good now for Erik Axelsson to claim the pole position. Back in the GT4 class, still Ben Smith fastest. Ben Smith with a fastest time in the session of 1 minute 31.5. And that means that Paul Laramie, the championship leader, second fastest, is actually a little way back, about 3/4 of a second off that pace right now. Laramie about to come across the line, though. Is that an improvement? The answer is no, that was a 1:36, so quite a slow lap for Paul, and he's not going to have things all his own way tonight. In fact, Paul just understeers wide coming out of Redgate Corner, and that will mean that his final lap of the session is squandered, rather. But we have late improvements perhaps in the offing here from the championship leader. Carl Felvers turns up through Coppice Corner. Nice tight line there through that never-ending right-hander. Doesn't even use all of the road, actually, on the exit of the corner as he backed off on this lap. A 24-second middle sector set by Kyle as he makes his way down towards the Fogarty S's. So Carl Felvers, here he comes out of the Fogarty S's down towards the Melbourne Loop and still seems to be pushing on. So maybe that was just the line that he was taking out of Coppice. Needs to find 32 thousandths of a second to set the pole position time. Third place would be decent for him, but he knows that given how evenly matched everyone else has been so far this season, he wants to start as close to the front as he can. Carl Felvers, then one of the last drivers to see the checkered flag in qualifying, comes across the line, and in the end, it is no improvement. Nicky Taylor isn't improving either, and so I think we're done with qualifying. Eric Axelsen looking good for the pole position in the Cup class, whilst Ben Smith, on his debut, perhaps looking to continue this run of debutantes doing well in this championship, is going to be starting on pole position in that class. We'll hear from both of those drivers, as well as have the build-up for race number 1 of the night in just a couple of minutes' time. Welcome back, everybody. Then qualifying done here at Donington Park, and we've got two very happy pole sitters ready to have a chat with us. We'll start with our Cup class and overall pole sitter. And it's a long time since I've had the pleasure of saying this, because starting on pole position is Eric Axelsen. Eric, welcome back to the front row of the grid. Great to have you back in full-time competition with us here. See, enjoying your return to racing with us so far?
Yeah, sure, I'm doing. This was a great surprise, to be honest. After a little bad start last week, this feels much better.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention Brands Hatch, but since you brought it up, it was a bit of a shame, wasn't it? Because the results weren't great, but actually I kind of got the feeling that the pace wasn't too bad. It was just such a competitive field. You only had to get involved in one incident, and then that was your chance of winning a race gone.
Yeah, you're right. I felt quite fast in practice, you know, and then I got like a bit tangled up in quali, and then I had actually a pretty good race one, but then I got caught up in that turn one incident in race 2, and I think I ended like last or something like that.
Which hopefully isn't going to happen here. You're starting in a good position to avoid that in this race. Eric, what's the game plan here? Do you think you've got the pace to pull away, or is it going to be a bit of a defensive race?
Well, that has to be the plan, of course, to pull away. We'll see how that goes, but yeah, it will be fun.
Looking forward to it. Eric, best of luck, and congratulations on the pole position. Good to have you back.
Thank you, Andy.
So Eric Axelsen then starts on pole in the... While another new driver to welcome into the commentary box is our Cayman GT4 class pole sitter, Ben Smith, making his debut racing with us here at the VRRC. First of all, Ben, great to have you here, and well, great to have you on pole position. Were you expecting that sort of pace?
Not really, if I'm being honest, considering the caliber of some of the other guys in here, but I'm just really pleased. I just don't really know what to say.
Well, the lap was a good lap, and it was quite a bit quicker than Paul Laramie, who dominated last week. So you've got to be happy with that. Do you think there was any further improvement to be had, or was that as quick as you can go?
There might have been a tiny bit more, but I mean, Donington's always a track that I've really enjoyed on Sims Various, so it's great.
Good stuff. And plans for the race now? Obviously, it'd be nice to lead every lap, but 25 minutes, quite a long time. You've got to pace yourself a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially any incidents ahead with the Cup guys, that could always cause a bit of carnage, but we'll see.
Good stuff. Well, hopefully we'll be chatting to you again after race number 1. Ben, very best of luck. Good to have you on board. And yeah, congrats on the pole position.
Thank you very much.
So Ben Smith will have pole in the Cayman GT4 class. Eric Axelson starting from the front in the Cup class. But Max Coates, close qualifying session bodes well for the race. In fact, we'll get into that in a moment, because first, need to remind you of some of the fun racing coming your way in the near future here at the VRRC. The fun races are continuing to go. The next one is in the Radical SR3 XXR. It will take place at Lime Rock Park on Sunday, November the 12th. That's this Sunday at 8 p.m. So it's a great free fun way for you to get involved with racing here at the VRRC. If you fancy something a bit more serious, where there are cash prizes up for grabs, then perhaps the Time Attack is the competition for you. It is for the next week or so going to be taking place in the Formula Mad car around the Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium. It will run until the 30th of October, actually, so you've still got a couple of weeks to get your time in. The fastest driver at the end of that time will win £15 and the honour of winning this particular Time Attack competition, with cash prizes running all the way down to the top 5 positions. So some other ways for you to get involved here at the VRRC. We'll have our first race then coming your way here from Donington Park in just a few moments.